I was actually going to.
Okay, let's start.
All right. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Jo Lang. I will be your host for today's member comment period. Welcome to our OPALCO November board meeting. Just as a reminder, these meetings are recorded and we do post them to our website. We are inviting members to ask any questions or bring up any comments here in the first part of the meeting. And we will also have some time at the end of the meeting as well, and we'll circle back to those follow-up questions. Just as a few reminders, please keep yourselves muted unless speaking. If you are going to make a comment, you can either use the raise hand button or you can paste your comment in the chat function of the Zoom meeting, and then we can call on you to make your comment. You will have up to 5 minutes to make that comment. And then the materials for today's session are posted online in our document library at opalco.com. They're posted each month in the week preceding the board meeting. Before we get into our comment period, I'm going to give a couple of quick updates. We are currently hiring for a few really great positions on our team, and we're really excited to be welcoming some new people onto our staff. We do have more information about those positions as well as how to apply on our website. And then from over the last few months, we got a chance to participate in some really awesome community engagement events, including things like Touch a Truck events. We did a truck retreat for Halloween on Orcas Island. We attended a career fair for vocational students and a county comprehensive plan community meeting as well. So it was a really great way to have some conversations with the community about OPALCO and our shared energy future. And then we are also really excited to announce some upcoming events for 2025 that we've already begun putting on our calendar. You can check out our website, the calendar on our website or the events page for those events, but we've got some awesome in-person town hall meetings, some more Island Way workshops scheduled, as well as some member appreciation events. So we hope to see you there. At this point, I am going to start our member comment period. So I'd like to see if we've got any members here who'd like to make a comment. Okay, perfect. I do see DDA. So let's go ahead and let's see, I'm gonna unmute here. I don't know if anyone else knows how to assist with getting the.
We're working on it.
Perfect. Thanks, Russell.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Didier Ginzig, and I'm one of the Odd Fellows, but I'm here as a private citizen, a community member. And I'm here to talk about our heat pump program. I'm going to be brief. I wanted to start with the history of the program, which is the Odd Fellows have been delivering firewood for people in need for over 20 years. And we see a lot of people in various situations, and we've recognized, especially through the nudging of Jay Kimball, that perhaps it might be a good idea, instead of just bringing them wood, to figure out a way to get them heat pumps. So there's a lot of reasons why that's a good idea, such as it's cleaner, such as for people who are in cognitive decline or they're getting older or what have you. There are many reasons it's a good idea. So I approached Hillary at OICF, and not only did she say, yeah, I like your idea, but she immediately did the old yes and. We also can help fund it. So she approached her board and they were very yes-ish. And we were able to get 2 heat pumps installed with Lauren Dickey for free to 2 very valid recipients. So now we would like to take those successes that we've had and expand them to bring more heat pumps to the community. And so we're approaching Opal. We've set criteria with Community Resource Center. And now we'd like to see how OPALCO might like to be involved. And the goal is to provide community members who are especially in financially difficult situation to get free heat pumps. Our goal is to get 5 a year if possible. And part of why I'm here today is I don't know who here on the Hollywood Squares of OPALCO that I'm looking at might get excited about it, but maybe it's one of you. And I'm hoping that one of you might want to reach out to me and to see how we can help move this program along. I'm here to generate excitement. One of the things we'll need, of course, is more donations. Hillary was very positive, and so was Lisa at Opal, that donors will give once we get the word out. We'll get people will be excited because this is a wonderful thing. I've been a little confused about the Inflation Reduction Act as a citizen of this country, of course, but also as a citizen of Orcas Island. I'm studying what is the Inflation Reduction Act, and as I understand it, it's coming through the Opportunity Council, if I'm correct, through Bellingham, through Community Resource Center. It's a lot of money, and I'm not sure if any of that money will reach Apelco, and I'm not sure if any of the Inflation Reduction Act could be put towards this program, but maybe that's worth someone's time to help figure that out. Of course, you guys help with rebates. That's very nice. And maybe there's additional rebates that we can do. I know that I've been speaking with Suzanne, who's no longer there, about USDA money, millions of dollars, spend it or lose it in the next few years. And I'm sure that's earmarked for something. But I'm just wondering if perhaps some of that USDA money might go towards this program. And then she sent me a very excited email that I couldn't understand. It was the BPA and the DHP. Does that mean something to any of you? The
Ductless heat pumps.
Oh, so the BPA has, thanks, a rebate program, and I'm not sure how that works. So I don't want to take up much of your time because I only get so many minutes, but that's the bottom line is perhaps there's funding and interest through Apelco to help get more heat pumps installed for people of the island. Thank you for your time.
And I do think that they did access the ductless heat pump rebate, low income rebate for $6,000 for one of those projects. DDA, do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Cool.
So Didier, you're going to be the point person because I could really see you being someone who wants to submit applications to resource centers and so forth. So we'll keep our ears open for sure and find out if there's any other grant funds that we could take advantage of. And thanks for bringing it to our attention. I know that this is our budget time, and we'll certainly have that discussion about, how we can help with rebates, and maybe we could incentivize or increase some of those rebates to help out the programs. We love the program. We've always appreciated the work of the Oddfellows putting in firewood. So really appreciate that. I want to make sure that we tap into governmental funds. Like you said, it's always a little interesting when you look at the Infrastructure and Jobs Act funds, but maybe through some of the other, community resources that are available, maybe we can get some of those as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, DDA. We appreciate it. Do we have any other comments from members at this time? Just as a reminder, if you've joined recently, if you have a comment, you can type that into the chat, or you can use the raise hand button. Okay, at this moment, I am not seeing anything else, so we are going to conclude our member comment period. We do have some time at the end of the meeting to circle back to some questions if they are put in the chat throughout the meeting. And otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Okay, I want to call to order the Apelco Board of Directors regular meeting November 20th, 2024. First item we've got this morning is our consent agenda. I believe all of you have read through that, so I'll be looking for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And are there any opposed or abstentions? No opposed or abstentions. Okay, that one passes. Appreciate that. Okay, the annual budget cycle. Foster.
Yeah, let's jump into the old budget. I think, Russell, if you could pull that document up. There's a lot of work that went into this. Really want to give a huge shout out to everybody at Opelika that had a partner, which is pretty much everybody. I mean, we really touch all the different players and from right away trimming and the crews and what we need to accomplish to all the obvious ones that you would see in engineering and accounting. So well done, everybody. This is a great photo of our annual meeting, this first one that we did without the ferries after the pandemic. So it was a really positive event, really appreciated all the attendance that we got from our members, and was something worth replicating. So we're going to do something similar to that over on San Juan this year. So that's pretty exciting. Well, let's jump into the budget. The budget is, I'll start with saying the 2024, because this is all based on what we've experienced in the fiscal year 24. And what we do is we project what the end of the year is going to turn out financially. And then we use those metrics to go forward with projecting what's a good budget for 2025. I'd say 2024 was I'll say a great year when it comes to the financial situation that Opelika is in. It was very consistent with what we expected to see. And what we do is we do a budget for the year in question, and then we give 4 forecasted years after that. And this one is very consistent with stair stepping from last year. This would have been the first forecasted year, and it's still in sync with what our expectations are. We're looking at a 6% rate increase going forward. That's pretty standard. We make those forecasts in the future. Obviously, we're trying to build our equity for more submarine cables that we have in the future and other capital investments that are coming our way. The 6% rate increase metric is something that's probably going to be around for the foreseeable future. So we're getting used to that. We've been using that same figure for, I'd say, at least a good 5 years. And I don't see it's going to go away anytime soon. The equity position is something to really pay attention to as we go through these numbers. Start off with the way that our budget works is to kind of drill it into everybody's head. If you looked at our revenue projections, we need the revenue to cover our expenses, and then we back into what those revenue projections are. Just on the surface, just to put the figures in your head, power costs are roughly about a third of what we need to collect in terms of revenue to pay our power cost. Labor cost is a third, and then everything else like capital investment, paying back loans to RUS, those kind of operational components are the remaining third. So always look at everything like third, and a third. Let's dive into some of the numbers that you can kind of see. Let's go to the next page. Got a little delay here. And what we're okay, thank you for that, Russell. What we're focused on going forward is really to communicate what's in store in the industry. And we know that the industry is getting really challenging. You're looking at Washington State trying to get the carbon out of our fuel mix, and that's mandated within our CETA Transformation Act going forward. What that translates to us is we got to start thinking about our power costs very differently than we have before. Since we were established in 1937, I'd say we've transitioned over to Bonneville Power Administration starting in the 50s, and we've been benefiting from pretty low cost power since those early days. Now we're in a situation where there's not going to be any hydro built. Where does that load growth come from? We know that Washington State is really one of their goals is to electrify heating and transportation going forward to lower the carbon attributes within our grid system. And they take that very seriously in terms of the kind of the mandates that are coming down from Washington State. It's putting a pretty big burden on how we procure power in the future. What that translates to, if low cost power from hydro system is going to be at capacity, then we got to look at other resources, and that's going to be a challenge for the region. If you're looking at intermittent resources being developed where possible, you're looking at solar, wind, and other than that, I think some of the permitting challenges that are coming along with building more generation are becoming kind of hard to deal with and hard to rely on. So the part of the focus that we're looking at is if we're not able to build new resources that are reliable and firm, then we need to anticipate that in our budgeting processes. What that does is the supply for power is going to be less than the demand. We also know that there's AI, artificial intelligence and data centers are popping up throughout our region as well, and know that those extra demands are going to be placed on our power costs are going to be through the roof. What does that translate to for Opalco? Means our power costs are going up. And we may be in a situation where reliable power is going to be in question. Those are going to be really important positions for us as we prepare for the future. We have a good staff. We're ready to tackle those efforts. Part of 2025 is going to be focused on communicating with our members. And that's going to be essential for us because if we want to generate power locally, we need to make sure that we engage everybody. We need to make sure that everyone understands why we're doing what we're doing, the necessity for us to put these generating facilities within our community, and communicate that, you know, the ability to efficiently use energy is going to be essential for us. Fortunately, we have our Switch It Up programs that are available for people to become energy efficient. We just had a conversation with DDA about putting ductless heat pumps into the hands of some of the low income members that we have. Reason being is what a great efficient use of energy when it comes to using electricity and ductless heat pumps. Our Switch It Up program is available and is a really good resource for everybody to take advantage of, knowing that the cost of powers are going to go up and reliability is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to going forward. I kind of want to jump right into the numbers. There's a good budget narrative going forward that we have. Why don't we go to that one table, if you will? Our last month, why don't we start with the load forecast? Last month, what we did is we went through and in October, weather is going to be a big driver of all of our 2025 budget. The colder it is, the more power we sell in the wintertime. That translates to a real positive situation in our financials going forward. What we anticipated last month, and I'll just kind of regurgitate what those estimations were from a forecasting perspective. We're looking at a La Nina, a little cooler of a weather pattern going forward, which is good. That means that we're going to be budgeting to sell more electricity because it's going to be colder and our membership needs to heat their homes. That's going to translate to something probably in the first 3 months of the year. The last 3 months where it gets colder again is still an unknown. So probably at least the first half of the year is going to be a little bit colder, and that's going to be to our advantage. You can see where we there's a good chart at the let's keep going down the El Nino path and the other charts that we have. This is a NOAA chart that references whether or not it's predicted to be an El Nino or a La Nina. La Nina is a situation where it gets colder, if I didn't represent that right. But La Nina is the situation that we're looking at for the first, or closing out this year in the first 3 months of next year. The red is indicative of the whole El Nino situation where it's warmer, so we sell actually less power. So make sure I'm really clear on that if I messed it up. Going into table 3. Move it over there. It's more than just the weather patterns. It also looks at how we look at our kind of the temperature of the air as well as the water. So as we're paying attention to both those situations going forward, let's go to the next one, 4. This is a complicated chart, but I always put it in here because I really personally, it's really telling. What you see red spikes. Those are the El Ninos where it gets really warm, and the cold spikes are harder to see, but you see it on like the bottom graph. And then you start to see what a cold pattern looks like. And the reason I like to bring this one up is because you're able to see how fast something changes from a warm condition, an El Nino, to a colder position, a La Nina. And that happens really quickly, and those are going to be dramatic impacts on our financials. So we really pay a lot of attention to what do we anticipate the El Nino, La Nina conditions to be. The differences in power are pretty interesting. And we're always going to be selling 200 million kilowatt hours through a year. The difference between the 200 million kilowatt hours and the 240 million kilowatt hours is really what makes our financials. Let's keep going. This is another, whoa. Why don't we skip down into where we go to the next all the way down? There we go. Let's go on to number 7. So we reviewed last October because we don't have time to kind of go through all this stuff again, but we did this is a good scatter plot for us to look at through the years how much power that we purchased for each of these years. And we're forecasting for 2025, you can see the dot there that's right above the projected 2024. So there's a decent amount of kilowatt hour sales that we're looking at, which is a positive. Some of the downside that we, in comparison is 2015 and 16. Those are really warm, strong El Nino conditions where we didn't sell as much power. Those were really challenging years financially, if you guys remember, for those that were around here. Getting into the upper, 235 million kilowatt hours. What I'm reading that chart where the annual purchase is on the left in terms of kWh. And then you have the heating degree days, which tell you whether it's hot or cold along the bottom. So you can see where we're forecasted to be more in a colder position going forward, which is always good. So note that we're in a good situation from a revenue projection perspective. Let's keep going down. Some of the financial highlights. I don't know if you can get those big enough to read. There you go. Thank you for that. Let's concentrate on those. Pretty consistent. We're in a really good financial situation now. Remember this. Here's a good metric. Back in 2017-ish, we started our replacement of submarine cable that went from Lopez to San Juan Island. Really big effort, $15 million project. Our economics were really solid leading into that. And we need to be, because as soon as you build up your equity, and I think our equity was in the 60% threshold, as soon as we built that project and we borrowed the funds to afford it and pay it back over the loan period of 30 years, our equity position dropped to pretty much the low 40s. So we had almost a 20% drop in our equity position just because of that one project. And we have similar projects coming up. So just note that we're on that rebuilding trend that we got to pay attention to. Our depreciation is pretty consistent with what we're looking at. Our first graph on the top left, the interest on the right is we're in a more rising interest expense and a different interest rate perspective. We have done a lot of really great work. If you look at that yellow line from an interest rate perspective, we rolled out our subsidiary. We've gotten through some really major capital projects. We just replaced a transformer in the prior year before we're starting to experience this increase in our interest rates. And those are our big driver, because those interest rates that we get last for a 30-year duration, and those are pretty impactful over the term of your financial conditions. Tier is its other tier is the times interest earned ratio. This is the amount of times that you can repay your debt. So you want to keep that what we do is always target something around a 2 in the regular tier. Kind of see our tier dropping down a little bit. It's something that we never want to over collect money from our membership or under collect. So I always want to hit it right on the dot. Keep going. Some more other metrics that we say, you can kind of see the debt when we get in a situation where we have major capital projects coming, you see those things spike. That's what a co-op does. I want to make sure everyone really understands it. When a co-op was formed, there was never any ability to, drive those capital costs up from our membership. You're a bunch of farmers and people were really trying their hardest to figure out how to get a utility off the ground. Well, that's where the RUS program comes into play. And it's really driven by making sure that you understand how to use debt, how to plan for it, build your equity position up so you can borrow the funds, and then make sure that you can pay it back over a 30-year duration, which is usually and typically what the asset's about, duration of that asset for its useful life turns out to be. So it's really, never be afraid of debt. Just make sure that we can manage it well with our equity position and our margins going forward. Now our margin, you can kind of see where the margins have been. Our margin is really the net income at the end of the year that we pay a lot of attention to. There's an operating margin and then a net margin after that. Again, we're not trying to over collect, but we're trying to make sure that we have the ability to repay any of the existing debt that we took on during the year. Let's keep going. Capital projects, we get in those areas where, you got a lot of intensive capital projects, and then they kind of calm down a little bit. And so you can build up your financial position to make those investments going forward. And we're in that situation right now. We got to start our financial planning for future projects, but you kind of see the 2017, you could see the capital expenditure that went along, and it's under the, you know, if you go look at all the investments that we made back in those days that were pretty large. The transmission was that red line that spiked up really high. That's that transmission cable that we were talking about. And then our distribution is in blue. You can see some of the milestones that we've been reaching there, making sure that our grid is reliable as it is. And I think we're doing a heck of a job. If you look at our reliability statistics, the ability for us to segment our grid into different sections so we could keep most of a grid up and operating. If a tree falls in one portion, we can sectionalize those other areas, keep them up and running while we focus on fixing and repairing a particular area.
Foster?
Go ahead.
The chart ends at 2029. When are we going to see the next big red one for transmission for the cable?
Yeah, you're going to see that really in we're probably right there after 2030 to 2033 is what we need to do. Is we need to do a flyover, if you will, an underwater flyover of our submarine cable that connects from Lopez to Shaw to Orcas, to see the condition of that cable, to see where in that window period we're going to have to replace it. Good question.
Yeah, because I think at some point we should extend this chart a little bit, so because it sort of looks like we're not seeing a big one, and it's just a little bit at the end.
Yeah, it's just starting to show up in that window period. Yeah, well said. Yeah, we can also put that in the words too, like going forward post 29.
You'll see in the capital budget area that's the beginning. That 2029 spike is the first bit of permitting and investigation in the next submarine cable.
Let's keep going. Good question. This is a chart I was trying to get to. I don't know if you could blow it up to read it. This really sums everything that we're talking about in 2025. And it gives you a comparison. It goes back into 2023 and what we're projected to in 2024 with. So it's a really good understanding of what we're doing and whether, you know, what we're selling in terms of, or purchasing in terms of kilowatt hours, the revenue that we're generating, and what we need to accomplish in order to satisfy our reliability standards and maintain our mission statement. Again, you're starting to see the kilowatt hour purchases number going up a little bit from what were projected from last year, which is a good thing. You can see the operating revenue goes up accordingly. If you're going to sell more power, or if you're going to buy more power to sell, then you're also going to, your cost of power is going to go up. You see that increasing more than you would expect, by the way. There was something, I don't know if you guys remember, something called a residential exchange through Bonneville Power Administration. There's a note on the side here that Bonneville had there was an issue going on about preference customers and in the region, and money was credited back to our service territory for co-ops in the form of something we call a residential exchange, in comparison to the IOUs for preference power. So we actually got a big credit for years. Now that credit's starting to dry up, and you're starting to see a pretty dramatic decreases in the credits that we once had. So those are starting to hit us as well as a little bit more power cost going forward. I want to make sure it's really clear on, I talk about future load growth quite a bit, and where's that power going to come from? To put it in perspective on where we are today, we have a slice of the dam system, and what we need to operate today really maximizes our allocation. We're just starting to get over those thresholds. We call them tier 1, right? That's our slice of the basic Bonneville Federal Hydro system. Sometimes we go above that number because there's a weather event and so forth, but overall we do an average. We're just starting to tickle going above those thresholds. So there's a little bit of a grace period in there when you go over a megawatt, and that's where we're over our allocation, but still in that megawatt perspective. There's a lot of utilities out there. I know, like in Oregon, for instance, Central Electric growing like gangbusters. Flathead in Montana growing like gangbusters. They have a huge open position. They've used up their allocation from Bonneville Power Administration, and they have to go to the open market. So when I start talking about tier 2 and that load growth, I'm really looking about from this date going forward, those costs are going to be pretty dramatic. Using our base load or our allocation from Bonneville Power Administration, those go up as well, but not nearly as dramatic as what we're talking about going forward. Going forward, we're looking at our costs doubling. So any load growth we have, we're going to be paying double. Now, that doesn't mean that all of our costs double. That just means that increment that's growing in terms of load growth is going to be really expensive. And then in short order, the projections that we're seeing through our power provider, PNGC, are looking to triple. Now, that's really dramatic. Now, if you were a growing utility like Central or Flathead, holy smokes. I mean, you're looking at some really large power costs. And that's what we're trying to, we're not trying, but we're getting ahead of with our power resource group that we joined, PNGC, and power is all about trying to plan for that high dollar, really expensive power, and putting in the investments in that generation on the mainland as part of the solution as well. So we can, Bonneville, when they're going to be maxed out at their power at certain times, then it's going to be really expensive. The more we can work together with our fellow co-ops, the group that we joined, PNGC, is growing as well. In fact, there's so much interest in it because power costs are going up throughout the cooperative industry, like all utilities, that joining forces together with other co-ops, I think there's like 25 targeted with PNGC that are joining our resource group. And our goal is to collectively get together, build those resources. They're going to be more than hydro system that we've been living with for a long time, but we still can be better at just going with the open market that's projected to be double or triple what they currently are. That means that we buy power for $42 to $45 a megawatt, and we're looking at going to 85 in short order. Holy smokes. And then you're looking at getting into the 120 megawatt when you get into firming, right? Because a lot of the new generation that is put in place is solar. So what happens in the nighttime? What happens when there's no wind? And what Bonneville requires is you to firm up your intermittent resource, or they'll do it for you. And they have something called an ESS charge that they're going to be charging. We don't know exactly how those statistics look, but they look like they add another $20 per megawatt to firm up that power. Really dramatic. I mean, that's half of what our tier 1 costs are. So I hope everyone gets a good understanding about going forward, why it's essential for us to do what we're talking about in terms of trying to build locally, making sure that we have efficiency measures in place for our members to take advantage through our Switch It Up programs, and really anticipate that we need to start budgeting for additional resources through our power resource group, PNGC, if we're not able to build these things locally. These numbers are real, and those costs are going to really hit home if we can offset them with doing a better job than going on the open market and using Switch It Up funds and grant funds going forward from our government. That's going to help our membership dramatically. Well, that gets into the cost of power side. Everything else is pretty standard. You're going to see, we had a union contract labor increase. We have a 5-year labor contract. You see a lot of labor increasing, and any of the numbers that are above the 6% estimate are primarily driven by the labor component through our union contract and so forth. You can see that our margins are, they are what, our margin, what we do is we use that to pay off our capital credits. And we also use those margins to really generate the new equity position. So the only way that you can build equity, and we said that's key because you need to borrow the funds for those big projects, is through having a margin at the end of the year. So know that that's very important as well. Some of the other statistics you see down below are the tier. We just went through some of the estimates for tier. This is the ability to pay off whatever our debt component is. So from a board perspective, it's really important for us to make sure that we're solvent, that we can pay off what we need to from our loans. The equity, we broke it out in 2 parts. The equity is always based on the bigger number that includes the rest. That's our Switch It Up program. But we want to make sure that we're clear. We've broken out our equity into 2 components. One is a percentage of total capitalization. That's one that you'll really want to target when you start looking at future submarine cable going forward. But we love our Switch Out program so much, and it's been such a big benefit to our community that we see a lot of demand for it. So what we've been doing is, I know that the solar number that we've actually provide the capital for our members to build solar on their homes. And I think the numbers are well above $7 million to date that we've had for those programs. And that adds into that equity percentage because it's a borrowings. Now, it doesn't directly impact our operations because it goes directly into the membership, but just aware that there's a big difference between the equity that we use for, you know, what we need to watch and build our equity up so we could afford our capital projects going forward. But we do have to anticipate our rest portion that's going to drive up our equity percentage is lower if we're not careful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Foster, just a quick question on that. So the Switch It Up funds that we have are what, about 36 million left or something? What is it?
Yeah, there's a good table that's coming up.
Okay.
Maybe we can get to that. I think that's a really good segue.
Well, just my question is that adds to the total debt. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does. There's a great little, if you can find that.
So, I mean, it's just when you run a debt to equity ratio, you take the 100 million and the 67 million, but you run up with a debt to equity number about 1.5, which is not outlandish by any stretch compared to the utility industry as a whole. But it's not really that bad if you take that because that Switch It Up funds it gets paid back over time. We're not paying it back. It comes from the members, paying it off. So it's not as bad as it looks in theory.
It's not as bad as it looks, but we need to know there's a trade-off, Vince. Do we love the program? You bet. Is it worth for us to make sure that we have additional margin to cover it? Yeah, it is.
Sure.
And because we're in a situation where we basically borrow, and then we borrow from RUS and then re-lend those dollars back to our membership at a cost between 2 to 3%.
Right.
Which now the interest rates are, in the 7s. So that's a big benefit for our members. And I think having a solution that says, hey, get as energy efficient as you can, because we know the power costs are going to go up. And so at least that we can help our membership prepare. There you go. This is what I was looking at. So what we've done is we've borrowed RESP, right? That's their program. Now we call it Switch It Up. So sorry for any confusion that you have, but it's the Rural Energy Savings Program. And we've made 3 borrowings, 1, 2, and 3. You can kind of see what those tranches are. So what we've borrowed is 46.8. And then we've lent the difference between those two numbers out. So we have almost $29 million left over that we can still rent out going or get over to our membership in the future, which we're going to be running out of those funds fairly quickly. They're really taking hold. The more the interest rates are going up on the general market, the more we're seeing interest in our programs. And remember, we've also opened that up to new construction in our service territories too. Any questions on that program? Thanks for finding that. I know it was kind of like a needle in a haystack. Let's go back up into the other area again. Sorry for the out of order there.
Detour.
Yeah, the detour that we did, Russell. I don't know too many. I know of just a handful of utilities that have really taken advantage of the member relending program, that REST program. And I got to give a big shout out to Travis on our team. He was, we were very innovative when we first started. He did a lot of homework to try to figure out how not to become an institutional lender, but still allow those funds to be used for capital, which is, we've come up with that innovative tariff approach that's been really beneficial. In fact, most of the co-ops reach out and talk to Opalco and Travis about how to set up a similar program. I think we're good on this page. Any questions on the general statistics that we're looking at for the 25 budget? And then go ahead.
Actually, a couple of questions here.
Sure.
I'm anticipating, what you're going to be looking for us as a board to approve in the way of rate increases going forward. And, 6% per year doesn't sound too bad for this next year, but I think we need to think in terms of what is that over 5 years and 10 years. Really, we're going to be increasing our rates by 50% if we stick at 6% here for the next 5 years, and obviously double that for 10 years. So I think we have to be very, very careful, and because other people are going to be doing the same math on this and seeing how quickly rates are going up. I would love to see a yardstick in there which compares what we're doing to try and keep our power costs down compared to what, let's say, tier 2 power we would be buying on the open market, and seeing what kind of savings were generated with the approach we're taking to integrate our resources intelligently and cost effectively.
Yeah, that's
You get
interesting. I
what
like,
I'm asking for here.
yeah, there's something there. I like where you're going with that, trying to make sure that we become as energy efficient as we can. I know that we've done the really good programs, but I'll put our heads together and come up with figuring out what those metrics are to monetize that. Is that fair, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There was another question that was raised by Brian when we distributed the package. Why don't we go to the next? I think there's a couple other comparative slides that were very helpful. These were put in place, Brian. I think these are the ones that you were referring to earlier. But Brian asked, there was some interesting cooperative comparison stuff. Now, in the past, there's a cooperative lender called CFC, and they've been saying, hey, they want their information to be kept a little bit more private. So what we did is we put it in a different format and didn't use direct, they call them CURDAs. They didn't want us to release their CURDA report for whatever reason, but we used the information to put these slides together, and Jay did a good job working with Travis. Over the years, the first one is a great slide. We've been seeing this thing for a long time. It's the history of a typical bill. What does a bill look like? And I think the original date was, the 92 level, if my eyes will read. The history of somebody that uses an average of 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, and what does their bill look like? And compared to 1992, and once you adjust everything for inflation, we've done pretty darn well. I mean, here in the Pacific Northwest, taking advantage of the hydropower has really been a big benefit from us. Now, what a co-op does is take care of our members, and we got two vertical bars that are gold. The first one, the large one, is a recessionary time frame, and we really minimized any rate impacts during that time. We actually did the same thing during the pandemic. So we have another vertical bar that's gold, and we didn't raise rates during that pandemic year that we had. So you can kind of see the rates dropping. So we've been pretty darn good. I like what you're saying, Jerry, going forward, and I think we should continue on with that. But I also like looking in comparatively, where do we sit when it comes to, our historic rates? Because it's interesting. When I first started Opalco, I went back to the financial statistics called the Form 7 that RUS requires. And when we got the submarine cable delivered to us, and they basically handed it off to us over on Lopez, it was a benefit, right? Big celebration. Here's a power cable that comes from the mainland, submarine cable, just amazing. But when you really look at the financials of Opalco, we had to do something with that. We actually had to take it and then build new submarine cables that went to San Juan, which is really far away. We had to bring it over to Shaw and Orcas and the other islands that we've managed to connect. The year of the 60s, when you look at it, we were completely bankrupt. I got to say, without the RUS program, there's no way we could have afforded to build a utility in a complex, 20 island service territory without being a co-op and being an RUS co-op that allows the borrowings for that to happen. So that's why, it's a really great history for us to really understand where we are. We're going to have the ebbs and flows. We're going to have the big capital investments. We're going to have to make sure that our cash flow generation can pay off those debts that we get from our RUS and make sure that we upkeep our our maintenance. The other one that was really notable in those financial statistics was we had those nasty storms back in '89. And we underground, right? We undergrounded, I think we're close to 90% of our distribution lines are underground now. That was brilliant from the leadership group back in those days. They were just wonderful, and we all benefit tremendously from. And those are those cooperative things that we made the investments, and we still do them today, that keep us with more reliable power than many of the utilities that we see on the mainland. And our economics are pretty darn solid. Let's go now to number 2 down below. Is if you compare us to, what is our utility plan? Well, we're really expensive to operate, right? We're at the highest. Opauco, in comparison to Opauco, the US, the state, and our peers, which are the co-ops, we're high, right? We got big investment in our infrastructure. Now go over to chart 3. Chart 3, you look at, you're like, what's our cost of service per member? Well, if you look nationwide and you're like, wow, I mean, we're under what the nationwide is. Now we benefit from the hydro system, which is wonderful, and we're lucky to have it, because a lot of the other cooperatives and utilities out throughout the nation don't have the advantage that we do there. And so the US is dramatically higher, but we're pretty consistent within the rest of the state of where we need to based on our operations. I think these are evidence that we do a heck of a job in a really complex, expensive service territory to operate and keep our metrics and our cost of service within, as good as a co-op can be. Remember, a co-op is only in existence to say, here are the costs, and then we're going to pass whatever those costs are and keep as efficient as we can to our membership. Now, number 4 is just it goes back into that distribution, how much of our cabling system is underground. It's exacerbated by the fact that the glaciers tried to wipe this whole place out, and they couldn't, because it's so hard to, the bedrock that these islands are in place right now, it's really hard to dig in. And we managed to put a lot of underground in these rocks. It's really great because the trees can't knock them over, but it's not a small price tag. And we should all celebrate, the board back in that '89 timeframe that really had I think there was an undergrounding fee of less than $2 on average that the members paid on their bills to do that service, which was probably a gigantic decision to make at the time. Let's keep going. Rate sensitivity. Now, here's one thing. Remember, we needed to generate the money to pay for our expenses, and we need to make sure that we build the equity. So just know that in this chart. So the first line is, or the first grouping is, what if you didn't raise rates? What would happen? Well, nothing good is going to ever happen when you start looking at your margins dropping down, to negative. You can't survive financially. You're missing your loan covenants with RUS and CFC when you start dropping those numbers down. So what is the right number? We jumped the recommended option 1 is where we are today, and that's that 6% rate increase number. And you can see why. You can look at all the numbers that we see, the statistics that we look at, both in terms of loan covenants, as well as margins, as well as tier, which is that ability to pay back our loans over time. We want to keep those above that 2 level and still build our equity up, because we know that equity is going to be needed dramatically once we get into that 2030 timeframe, Brian, and going forward from there. And that equity is still a little low, if I would have to say. I wish it were higher than not. The neat thing about it is we're getting to a situation where our internet subsidiary is starting to help us along those lines. So we've managed to get profitability on our internet subsidiary, which they don't actually bring back dollars into our organization of Opauco, but the equity, because we're 100% owners of it, goes right into this bottom line number. What that translates to is we get additional equity increases through our internet subsidiary that's starting to make money. So we should be able to catch up in time that we need to by the time we get into that next submarine cable that goes from Lopez to Shaw and Shaw to Orcas. Some of the other alternatives we could consider just don't raise up the equity positions high enough, and they keep us into a situation where it just doesn't work financially. The next one that we see, option 2, is we try to target a tier of 2, but then the rates are all over the map. Increasing one year and not the next year, and you get that volatility. it's something that we've seen that the members are really challenged with. If you don't raise rates very high one year and then they go through the roof the next year, they're really getting that a flatter kind of line of a 6% a year is a lot more user friendly for our members to understand. If you go to another option 3, let's go to the next page. You go 3, I kind of looked at it and said, well, what if we just did instead of a 6, what if we did a 5? And then I said, what if we did a 4, just to give the board a good example of what do the fundamental metrics of a PALCO adjust by when you do that. And again, you really got to anticipate what your equity position is growing and what your margin and your tiers are doing. If they're starting to drop below 2 in terms of a tier, that's not a good sign. And then that translates to margin, which in margin, remember, is the only way you build your equity position up, by adding more equity in. So like we've said for the last 5 years, we've been trending in that 6% category, like Jerry just brought up. We still see a need to be on that trajectory like we did last year and like we did the times before.
Buster, got a question?
You bet.
Yeah, on that analysis there you're doing where you're looking at the proposed budget future years for reference only, what are your assumptions for the cost of power when you're putting those together?
What we do is we the first thing is we start looking at that weather pattern, right? The weather pattern is really something that it becomes a little precarious because you're flatlining or you're trending something up and you really don't understand that. So know that we try to anticipate at least some weather patterns in there, but we have a tendency to just kind of flatline that. So a little bit of risk profile that goes along with it. For future years, we look at our load forecasting, and then we look at our long range plan. Remember, we have a series of planning documents that the board reviews, and we look at our long range, our load forecast, our long range plan, and then our long range capital plan, and we start anticipating what that load growth looks at. And then going forward, what we do is we know we have increasing load going to tier 2, which is that higher rate, and we anticipate those and we embed those into those economics using PNGC to help us come up with those estimations.
Right. Yeah, the reason I question that is because I don't put a lot of faith in what we're going to have to do in those outer years. I'll give you an example. Our government has made CETA the law of the land. We got to deal with it. And in my personal opinion, they're woefully ignorant about what the implications of that are going to be over time. I'll give you an example. The Puget Sound Energy, our brethren across the water, has got to basically replace 45% of their total load with renewable energy by the end of 2025. And they're scrambling around looking for that. I know for a fact they're signing power purchase agreements for firmed energy because that's what they need. So this is either wind and solar backed up with a 4-hour battery or something. And we're seeing numbers like $112 a megawatt hour for what they're going to have to do. And you're seeing it's going to get settled in court cases right now. But there's a concern about the data centers that are going in. And a lot of them are trying to do a direct connect. They're trying to basically go around any utility in between and buy directly from Bonneville Power Administration or a non-federal power facility where they can do it. And this is already causing court cases where they're saying, well, then when they do that, they're avoiding having to pay for the costs of transmission that has to be changed and other things are going. So they want to be forced to make them go directly through a utility as opposed directly to these power suppliers. And I don't know how that's going to play out, but the point is that Bonneville's not going to make any more tier 1 power. There may be even less of it going forward. It's fixed at an average 7,500 megawatts, on an annual basis. And so everything that everybody's going to buy above it's going to be at this wild and woolly market that's going out there. So, it's stay tuned, boys and girls. I don't know. I think you're doing the best you can with the numbers that go there. But, I think, next year's fine. And we're going to have to be very vigilant about how this proceeds going forward.
Couldn't agree more, Vince. Thanks for really breaking it out in detail. We see that on PNGC's level all the time. Remember, I go down there once a month and we get together with our now 25 fellow co-ops trying to anticipate what the future holds. The hard part that I don't think a lot of people really understand yet is we buy that preferential power for between 42 and 45 a megawatt. Just remember that 45. Right now, deals are being struck for 80, and you're lucky to have them.
Yep.
And it's double the price that you're currently paying in terms of the hydro, because you're right, you're starting to see that tripling effect. And if you could lock them in for only double, you're better off, but you're still looking at doubling your price, which people are not going to be excited about paying those kind of dollars. And it hasn't come home to roost yet. And if you get an intermittent, then you have to firm it up, and then you pay those additional RSS charges that are at another $20 per megawatt. So boy, you're right. And I think that's why it's so important for us to keep those REST, funds, that Switch It Up Fund program really going. And at some point in time, we're going to come back. We've been, Travis watches over what's going to go on with that REST program through RUS, because we want to make another big loan when it's time before that program goes away, so we can enable our membership to become as energy efficient as we possibly can. Because we're about the only co-op that I know that really takes advantage, that has a solution for people in their membership to weather the storm, so to say, as opposed to just going with the open market that's going to 120 in no time. Let's keep going. Now, we came up with the rates, and this is something that we're going to be spending, and I want to talk a little bit about it, but I don't think we need to go crazy on it today. But remember, we also have to have the first reading of our tariffs. So if you need a rate increase of 6%, where do you collect it? And this is going to be something that we'll really focus on in December. I just want to make sure that we don't have to make the decision today, but there's some good metrics in the budget materials for us to reference. Now, what we've been doing historically is we've been hopeful that we could raise up. We were trying to figure out how to raise up our facility charge. But what we've determined in this fiscal year 2025 is that we're going to be doing a big rate study. And rather than make any big adjustments now, our staff's recommendation, or at least the thought that we have, it's up to the board, is to perform that analysis, really do a very detailed, thorough analysis. I think E3 is going to be someone that's on our bid list that would be experienced and understand some of the detail and data load requirements that we're going to be looking at in 2025 to come up with our rate scenarios, and use that to drive us for this time next year. Like this time next year, I'd like to be done with a rate study that's really in depth, and then we make adjustments to how we collect those dollars. Remember, you're agnostic in terms of OPALCO. If you need, the $3 million, you need the $3 million. We should be agnostics on how we collect it. And the membership in theory would say, if you collect it from kilowatt hours, or you collect it from facility charge or demand or whatever it turns out to be, the number's the same. It's just how you collect it. Now, that means you're going to have winners and losers amongst different members. And that's part of that rate analysis we're going to do. We want to minimize rate shock beyond belief, because we don't want people to have dramatic escalations in some of their rates. So those are those things that we need to spend a lot of time looking at before we start making decisions. But what I wanted to give some food for thought out there. And so our team did a really good job coming up with, well, if you wanted to split it in a couple of general ways that give you a good idea, now you could get into, a myriad of different alternatives based on what you're about to look at. But we came up with different options. Now, option one, we just said, well, why don't we split it equally between the facility charge and the kilowatt hours? We've been doing that for years. A little different than our policy. Our policy is put as much as you can to our facility charge, implement a demand component, and everything else is on the kilowatt hours afterwards. The next one is option two. What if you wanted to put 25 or 75 in the fixed charge, 25 in the kilowatt hour charge? Okay, that's more consistent with the policy. Option three is all kilowatt hours. That's always been, people sometimes think that, an all kilowatt hour, increase, just put it all to kilowatt hour charges. That's kind of the one people have a tendency to consider our rates only tied to what the facility charge is, which is wrong, right? Our rates are based on, a component that's our facility charge and then a kilowatt hour, but you kind of look at both of them. But I think a lot of people just gauge our rates depending on what that facility charge is, which is completely wrong. And if you looked at the way at IOU do, you'll see a really dramatically low kilowatt hour, I mean, a low facility charge and a high kilowatt hour, because they still need to make the revenue requirements work. But since they're a lot lower on the facility charge, you think it, you know, the appearance is that they have rates that are lower. Or you can put it all to fixed charges. Now, if you went to our rate and you did that, you can see the numbers that are pretty dramatically higher than, you know, an even split. We just need to come to the conclusion of that's something that we need to think about. If you went, by the way, if you wanted to put all of our fixed costs in the facility charge and just pass through the kilowatt hour charges based on what your usage profile, that would mean that your facility charge needs to be like more than double what we are. It needs to be like $138 if you wanted all of our fixed costs and just pass through the kilowatt hours. Now, I'm not remotely suggesting that, but just a lot of people think that when they look at the facility charge, that covers all of our fixed costs, and that's not the case. We carry a lot of our fixed cost collection within the kilowatt hour charge. So no, that's what we're going to be agonizing over in 2025 when we go through our rate scenario. Option 5 and 6, we've been debating this for the last, I don't know, last year, probably even more so, about demand. And I just wanted to put a demand component out here that, you know, if the board wanted to go forward with just a Band-Aid on our rate structure for this go around for this year in 2025, as we're going through the full analysis, here's what those numbers would look like. Again, I think we need to do our rate structure, our rate analysis, and come up with recommended rates and have those communications with our membership and then invoke these. But there is the ability for us to put a $1 demand, for instance, on our current rate structure, and the implications I could go through those with you right now, or you could do a demand, and then I have something else called a service size. And then I know in the last couple board meetings, we've had conversations about, hey, what do you do? And there's some social media informational pieces out there about our some of the larger, you know, people that are not full-time residents in our community. Are they paying their fair share of the facility charges? And the answer is probably not, but we need to make sure that we understand exactly what those are. But if we wanted to charge them a little bit more because they're not here using those kilowatt hours in the wintertime, and we know those kilowatt hours are used for the fixed component that I just referenced, then maybe they're not paying their fair share. And one of the items that I had on here was what to do is put another $13.70 on top of a 400 amp service, or if you went above a 400 amp service, maybe there was another $13.70 added to it as well. So we're trying to give up some options to make sure that it's fair, right? So it's all about trying to come up with what's equitable to our membership, because that's what a co-op does. We don't want to make sure that we don't take advantage of any one particular revenue class or rate class, and but also avoid some of those common principles of rate shock and so forth. Wendy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, my question was, how did you calculate the $13.70 for the greater than 400 amp service? And I know that in the overall economics that adding that charge to these larger services doesn't come out to an appreciable amount of money, but it is in the spirit of fairness, and it is more expensive to provide power to these larger amp customers.
Yeah, I think that the answer to your question is more analysis is certainly needed, Wendy. It was more arbitrary than we would like, but we were trying to anticipate, you know, how much you need a bigger transformer on a bigger home, right? So that transformer is going to be, you know, size larger, its line loss is going to be higher because it's a larger transformer and not utilized as much as it should be. We were trying to anticipate those. But it was more arbitrary than not. We would need to do that cost of service analysis that we're going to do in 2025 to really dial in those numbers better and give you a better confidence on what that looks at. We were, you know, I gave Travis a couple little thoughts of putting $10 in there for the 400 amp services and $20 for anything above that for a 600 amp service. And then on average is where it kind of gets into the $13.70.
I have a question.
Mark?
Yeah, I have a question specifically about those larger services. We have, are all of those, are we only talking about large residential services, or because we certainly have large commercial services that are 400 amp and large customers, but they're predictably large, right?
Yeah,
They're not
these are only
spiking. Okay, this is only residential.
only residential, and we went through a study. It's still on the website. If you go back to September, there was I don't know, a quick little overview. The board was kind of curious on some thoughts, so we put a couple slides together, and I think it amounted to, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was like, it wasn't as high as you would think. I think it was like 370, homes that had 400 amp services outside their, driveway. And then there was another 250 or something like that of additional services that were over 600 amp in their driveway. So smaller numbers, but is it the right thing to do? Yeah, I think there is some logic, but I think we need to do some more homework.
I agree with that. I'm supportive of like something like option 5, which is a initial toe in the water on demand. But I think to do something based on service size, we need to do more research.
Yeah, I'll give you a little background on the story, and please chime in. I think Mark and certainly Jerry and Vince were in the room at the time. But way back when, I think it was 2016, I think that's when I signed the policy. There was the thought of putting in a placeholder for demand cost. There were a handful of utilities were considering, or the industry was looking at putting a demand in there. We've actually, back in that time frame, we put together a bill that in your bill includes it today. Your residential bill has a line item that's 0 for demand, but we wanted to get people like familiar with the fact that and the demand component, just for the sake of the discussion in the video, it's, building the church for Easter Sunday, right? What is your demand? What are you going to use in the maximum amount for those increments for that month? And that's what you would get billed for, that additional infrastructure that your particular residents would use. And so that's what the demand component would be. You'd probably phase it in. What I see most utilities that do a demand is they phase in a number. And they usually start with a small de minimis amount, like 1, right? You end up with, maybe you have a demand read that gets up there. So maybe it's 4 times the dollar kind of situation going forward, or something small to start. And then it ramps up based on, how you want to calculate the demand during your cost of service analysis. But a placeholder, you would always want to phase in a demand component, and you would always start small. So that option number 5 isn't out of line, because you would probably start in a phased way as well. And I'd say option 6 would be the same kind of category. You want to start with a phased in amount as opposed to jumping right in there for the full amount. So an estimate is okay to do on the surface, as long as it's fair and equitable across the, cost of service metrics. But I also know that during a full rate analysis, then I think you get more guiding principles on how you would invoke it and how you would phase it in. So, and I know Vince, by the way,
I think Vince had taken a look, and I read, I believe there are 4 or 5 co-ops in our area that have a demand charge, and they're pretty model, not very high, but it's a step.
Yeah, I know, Vince, I want you to chime in.
Yeah, I've looked at this a lot, and I support studying the crap out of it and getting some statistical data. And I think we got to go back to the principle of what problem are we trying to solve. And I think, we've got to understand what price signals we get now and from the market and what's going on. There's not a lot of evidence that customers are clamoring for demand or time of use rates. And in fact, if you start looking at the statistics, something like 72% of the utilities in the country offer time of use, but less than 9% of the people actually sign up for these things when they're made voluntarily. And there's a huge turnover rate. People get into them and do it. And there's lots of sociological reasons: complexity, confusion, lack of awareness, perceived unfairness, lifestyle inflexibility. There's a whole host of stuff that we got to address. And, before I sign up for any change or structure in there, I think we got to understand, why are we doing it, and what's the reasons for it, and who's going to benefit or not benefit from doing it. So I like the study, but I'm not ready to sign up for imposing anything at this point in time.
I do agree with you, Vince, that we lack price signals from the outside market in a direct sense right now, right? But on the other hand, we just had an extensive discussion about what's happening to the cost of power
Yeah.
already. So it's not like what we lack are directly causally connected pricing signals. We aren't lacking information on what's happening to pricing in the market in general,
Right.
right? And so I do think, and I think we talked about this last year in a discussion very much like this one, is that we've been kind of holding off on rate design, rate restructuring, because we want more data, right? And I would caution us that we have to start making some, I can endorse the idea of just doing something flat like we did last year because we were going to study it. But now we're saying we're going to be flat and study it again next year. And we can't kick the can down the road for too long. And I know you don't want to. I know nobody here wants to kick the can down the road. But, you know, it doesn't, to me, you know, I think we need to start putting incremental measures in place to provide price signals that may not come directly from Bonneville, but they come from knowledge of what's happening to the cost of power in the market, right? And we have to get people used to paying attention to how they spike our power demand somehow.
One thing to keep in mind, though, it's not just from Bonneville. Remember, a good portion of our costs are internally for a distribution system and transmission.
Sure.
And we understand that. And we're not going to get anything from Bonneville or the market on that. So I do think that we actually have information of decades and what we're looking to see forward. And I think that needs to be part of it in our thinking about the rate charge in the future.
So let me give you an example. I took my own house, I scaled it to make it a 1,000 kilowatt average, and I tried a bunch of these different rates. I took the current rate, I took various demand charges, I took time of use, I did it with and without solar. And you know, can you explain what it's going to do to the typical solar user if you start throwing it? It's very interesting because I looked at 600 and I looked at what 481 of the solar members with and without the solar, and look at the stuff like that. And inevitably, all of those people are going to see higher bills if you stick any kind of demand charge on them, because by and large, all of their demand, or if you put time of use, all that stuff occurs at times when they're not producing power. So, you know, you can explain, you know, you're in theory, you're doing all this good stuff, but now my bill's going up. So I think, you know, whatever you do, you're going to need to explain why you're doing it. And I think we need to understand better about what the impacts are going to be.
Sure.
No matter how small it is, it's going to whack some people like monstrously.
So
But what
say
we're trying to avoid is a giant step function in that bill by creating a gentle path to a different rate structure, right? I mean, if we do nothing and we keep doing flat things like this, we're eventually going to reach a point probably where there is when we're exposed to higher power costs, everybody's going to get a much higher bill and they're going to be surprised by it.
Is it going to be, you know, peak in the month, peak average, coincident peaks? Well, you don't know the answer, but we want to put something out there.
I don't, but I'm having flashbacks from last year's conversation where we said almost the same things.
So the other thing is, just last month, we talked in detail about how our fixed cost charge is too low, but it's a terrible shock to do it all at once. And so I want to say I agree with Mark that even doing this 25%, 75% switch for this year, it's just a little nudge in the right direction. And it's not even getting us all the way there. And at least it takes out some of the shock of trying to do it all at once. So for that reason, I'm with Mark on solely making changes because we're making them in the direction where we know we're headed. We just don't know the ultimate number. And then the other thing along those lines is, for me, on the option 6 of the service charge for these large services, and if one of those large services was in town during one of these cold weather events, the amount of power they're drawing is definitely going to be pushing us towards that tier 2. Like they will be using the most expensive power with their big power hog. I shouldn't say it quite that way, house. So I think that calculating what the cost of that larger transformer and the losses, line losses associated with that are, is not something complex. Like these other ones affect a lot of people, but that's not a complex calculation, that I would advocate adding some kind of a service charge for the large services, but I'd like to see it based in some kind of a data-based calculation of what we actually think the cost is in order to justify it, rather than just saying, oh, a $10 and a $20. But I think we could do that and come up with those numbers by December in terms of making a clear decision on what we think the higher charge would be for the large service sizes.
And Wendy, we could do a little bit more homework on that and see if we can come up with something. I don't know if I can or not, but we can give it a shot and report back to the board. I also appreciate where Wendy comes from. We've had a lot of discussion about Texas, right? So they have had a situation in Texas where they are regulated, and if a member wanted to buy power from any generating resource, they have options. But what they do is they hate the normal utility that serves their home collects their fixed costs. And Wendy, I'll have you chime in, but her base charge is 85 in an area where there's a lot more services to cover your fixed cost over. So 85 is still a tremendous amount. And then they pay for the individual kilowatt hours as a pass through to any of the providers. That's kind of where we wish we could go. It's just not easy to get there in our service territory. If you want to provide some color there, Wendy.
Yeah, just that we pay CenterPoint. I'm sure everyone's heard of CenterPoint recently from the freezes and the different hurricanes and everything, but we pay CenterPoint $85. And that's pretty much the standard charge around Texas. Dallas has Encore for power, but they're in that same price range. I looked it up. And that's the fixed charge because that's a separate company that provides all of the distribution. And then you can select from a number. I think we have 26 different providers for our actual power, and they offer all sorts of different plans. Some of them have demand charges, some of them give you free power nights and weekends, all kinds of different cost structures. So you can pick the cost structure on your power itself to what best suits your household to minimize your power cost. And then you can, make your own behavior choices in order to minimize your power cost. And personally, I like that system because it does let the customer minimize their bill. And right now, when we talk about demand charges and all of these other options for our charges, since our fixed cost charge isn't really agnostic, as Foster calls it, then none of those calculations work out agnostically for customers trying to minimize their power bill.
Right.
Thank you for that, Wendy. That well said.
Tom, Jerry, Brian, what are your thoughts?
I'm interested in exploring the larger service side of it with some more data, but I think that would be interesting. I tend to agree with the strategy discussion in terms of making some progress heading to where we need to go, as opposed to another year or two of minimal change.
Right, and I agree. I think Wendy has explained it pretty well, and I support that.
Well, I agree with you, Brian. I think we've done a pretty good job over the years of staying below the rate shock threshold. And that's good to see, but at the same time, as I brought out earlier on,
Did we lose him?
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Something glitched.
Yeah.
Jerry's
Maybe
not
I lost
on the
Jerry.
call anymore.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Shooks, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just listening to all of this conversation. I think a couple of things here, right? One, we all know and agree the direction we need to be headed anyway. So I think making those steps now, moving towards that direction is in my opinion the best move at this point, even if we don't have all the data. But as everyone else has said, I think making a data centric decision is where I'd like to see us, head.
Thank you for that. It sounds to me like, Vince, if I had, we're gonna go back before our next meeting, do a little bit more homework on, sounds like option 2 is something to consider. And then maybe doing some more homework and data collection around the service sizes and provide the board with some better clarity on those numbers as well. So I think I got good marching orders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jerry's back. Jerry, we lost you.
we lost
Didn't
you
have
for a
really
second.
good connection. I don't know if you want to chime in again.
Well, you're muted. Jerry, you're muted. There you go.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Okay. I'll try and stay with the game as much as I can, but I've got a pretty weak internet connection down in the remote part of Mexico. But the sunny weather makes up for it. Anyway, sorry, what was your original question here, Vince?
Just your thoughts about the discussion we just had about, the options on the charges, or what we should or shouldn't do at this point in time.
Okay. Well, I really do appreciate all those different boxes, because it really does cover the full spectrum of what we can do. And I've been supportive of what we've done over the last few years, which is to increment up the fixed charge and the watt-hour charge by the same percentage every year. People I talk to seem to think that's a sensible way of going about it. They understand better what it is. And, I think that's, now that we've got that in people's heads, we should probably consider going forward in the same kind of way, just looking at an overall percentage that we're going to have to do each year. And I think, as I stated earlier, we can provide a yardstick there with what our rates are compared to if we just stuck with the full charges we get if we just went to tier 2 on all the incremental increases that we'll get over the years. I think that will be staggering, and that will send a lot of people into rate shock. So we can show how much we're saving by the approach that we're doing. I think that would be very beneficial. People might follow that and understand it.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, Vince, I think we're done with the budget unless there's any other questions there. I would love to have the board make a motion to approve our 2025 budget as represented, and then we'll come back for our read of tariffs in December.
Foster, just one quick question. I'm trying to understand, and it says residential demand $1 per kilowatt, and then there are fixed costs of $740 and $1374. So I don't understand what the $1 per kilowatt means.
Yeah, so what you would do is you would pick your rate scenario in options 1, 2, 3, and 4 above, and then you would add that. That would be a demand that would be added as a line item to that. So you would have a demand row that would be equivalent to the $7, but it would be for $1, but that's would be the result that comes in from that.
Real quick, that's a dollar per kWh. Your average kW per consumer comes out to be 7.4. So there's the math. $1 times 7.4 kW. That's how that's derived, is the average kW for each consumer.
Because this whole chart is the average consumer, right?
Right. And if you did that $1, that would basically bring in 1.2 million of revenue. And then we would take that revenue away from whatever that would be above. So if you did a evenly 6% split, then those come down accordingly. We can provide more clarity at the next one if you want us to, Brian. That's easy.
Thanks,
to do.
that helped me. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll get. We'll do is if you want to. It sounds to me like there's some interest in option 1, 2, and then a demand we could break out separately, and same thing with demand and the service charge. I mean, we could add those together in a scenario too. So I think I got is everything the board's going to be needing going forward.
Okay.
Also, one further question here.
Yep.
We're still looking at the average customer of 1,000 kilowatt hours per month.
Right.
Given our increased demand as going forward here, is it reasonable to stick with that, or should we be reflecting the increased demand on what the average person is? You've always used this for many years. Or the other way to look at it is the demand increase due to more people, more complex system, that kind of thing?
Well, to answer that question, I think we need unfortunately, I think we need the 2025 rate study to really get into that level of detail, Jerry. What I'm fearful of is I'm okay with $1, demand charge. I think that's reasonable, and it makes sense with the 1.2 additional revenue that's going to be collected that you would take away from somewhere else. But I'm cautious when it comes to an all electric home, and what are those variables when you start looking at demand? Like, you're asking really good questions, and I don't even know if I can answer them without the rate study.
I mean, this is one thing that we talked about is needing somebody really good. Not a typical, not the kind of rate study we used to get from Guernsey, but branching out and finding somebody who can be very data driven to help us answer some of these questions, right?
Right.
And I agree, we need to see that study before we do anything serious, but.
And again, I think what we can do is I'll provide some further background and details within the rate, how we collect the revenue increase. And the things that we don't know, I'll just make sure I'm really clear that that's what the rate study will be utilized for. And if there's a way that we could put something in play earlier than that makes sense, that the board supports, then that will be my goal, if that makes sense.
Can you explain one more time, though, that demand, the $1 per kilowatt, based on what? A peak somewhere or an average, or what is it based on?
I'll let Russell chime in as well, but we were looking to see if the NISC system and the metering system works for it, but we think there's a chance for it. We got a little bit more homework to do, but it was basically saying that the average KW is going to be in the 7.4 range. And we would look at the peaks during the morning peak and the afternoon peak and find out during those two intervals combined together, what would your demand be? And then get charged $1 based on those two peaks. Does that make sense?
Something like my maximum kilowatt usage during, say, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. or something. And whatever the biggest thing is there, it's $1 for that number.
Yeah, we didn't want to do it.
Okay.
We only wanted to do it at our system peak too. Is what we're trying to
understand.
This particular scenario was just based your maximum hourly demand over the month period, and then take those and take the average over the months for each consumer, average it over all of our residential consumers.
So
And
what
that's
what
how
I
the
will
7.4 was derived.
what I'll recommend is that if you start relying on that, and if that number starts getting up bigger, and you're reducing something someplace else, you're rolling the statistical game on that stuff, because I think, unless you know what it's going to look like, those peaks are going to be all over the place all the time by everybody. It's not going to be, you're going to get a weak law of large numbers type of a thing, but depending on the revenue is going to be highly problematic, is my recommendation.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I'm a little, I don't know. I just want to see the numbers and the statistics generated by someone who's going to be good at it. Because I think we're going to influence our own peaks with, what our cost profiles look like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got your homework assignment.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think for the option 6, when we take a look at that with the sharper pencil, we should look at it without the residential demand charge in it, just with the service size, like keep those separate.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing, Wendy. And then
Mhm.
either having one that like combines them together or whatever. I can come up with a little table that says what the results are if you wanted whatever combination.
Yeah, because it seems like right now the demand charge is so confusing that to hit someone with a bill that has both of these on it and then try to explain the residential demand charge, that kind of has hair all over it in my mind right now. Whereas the service size can be kind of straightforward.
You got it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do the following then. I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget as presented, and that we will expect an analysis in the December timeframe that will help us make a determination about what we may or may not do on terms of the tariffs.
So moved, Vince.
Okay, got one. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh,
Okay.
Brian,
Any further discussion, please? No. So all in favor, signify by aye.
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 Any abstentions or opposition? Hearing none, your budget is approved.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. What is our next item, Foster?
Could we add one comment to that, Vince? That,
Yes, please, Jerry.
we-
Yes.
We appreciate the level of thought that's gone into preparing this, and we understand
Yeah.
this is a very significant piece of work, and
Yes.
appreciate all staff's work on this and Foster's leadership.
Very much so. It is not easy.
No, we got a great team. Well, thank you, Jerry, for that. I'm sure they all appreciate it. I can motor through a couple of these things that are on the screen right now, Vince, if you want me to keep going.
Yeah. Let's see. What time is it right now? It is what, 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock?
Yeah. Just looking at what we got on the agenda next here.
Why don't I tackle the first two, and then the next one requires a executive session, then we break into that.
Okay, let's do those and then take a break.
All right. So we're looking at a special retirement of uncollectible accounts. This time every year before we go through our general allocation, which is the next topic of discussion, we first look to the accounts that are in arrears. And if there's any accumulation of capital credits, we apply those capital credits to any unpaid balances and before we do the general retirement. So this is the amount of capital credits applied to the uncollectible account, the UA balance. And then the discounted capital credits remain is the equity portion in for 26,000 for total capital credits retired for the special retirement for uncollectible accounts of 31,808. Given that, staff recommends a board to make a motion to approve the use of the member allocated capital credits to reduce or offset individual member delinquent UA balances as referenced in the capital credit bad debt payment program report. We got a big giant report that goes along with it if anyone's curious.
Does anybody have any questions on that? No. Then I'm looking for a motion as just read by Foster.
so moved.
Mark, second, anyone?
Second.
Tom's got it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed or abstentions? None on that. Okay, Foster, good.
Okay, and then the next topic, we'll let it turn the page here. is our general retirement. This is what we do every year as well. After we're done with the UA balances, to approve to fund the general retirement. Remember, we go through a general retirement smoothing process, which is very beneficial. So we pay off what's left of 1999. That's our 25-year retirement cycle. And then a portion or half of 2000, which is really nice. So we're going to retire 1.5 million is what the current number is. Based on the number of people that we could find and the collection and so forth, we still hold the dollars in the accounts of all the individual members. But the people that we know we can find amount to a projected check run of 1.125 million, which is nice to get those dollars back in the hands of our membership, certainly around the holidays. So with that, staff is recommending a motion to approve the payment and retirement of capital credits for the remainder of 1999 and a portion of 2000 as outlined above.
Okay,
It's
looking for,
interesting to note here, Foster, that a portion of 50% of the year 2000 is greater than the 100% of 1999. So there must have been a lot of new accounts during that year, the year of 2000.
To make sure that I'm really
explain that.
to make sure I'm really clear. So last year we did 1998 and half of, approximately half of 1999. So this is just the balance that gets us to the 100, Jerry.
So it's not 100% 99 isn't really correct.
No, it's probably more like half, and then this is the balance to pay it off fully.
Okay, then that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I make it a little more clear next year. Thank you.
okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the payment and retirement of capital credits for the remainder of 1999 and a portion of 2000 as
So
outlined.
moved.
In a second, please.
Second.
Jerry got it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed
Aye.
or abstentions? None. Great. Excellent. Okay, Foster. All right, shall we take a break now?
Yeah, the next one is
Or-
it's just concerning the gen plan. Why don't we take a break and then get right back into executive session? We need to have a conversation about property sale as an executive session before we break back into regular session for approval.
All right, so let's meet back here at 10:20 and we'll stay in regular session, come back at 10:20. We will adjourn and go into executive, do our business, and then come back.
All right, so see you at 10:20. Is that it?
Correct, 10:20.
All right.
Thanks.
think Mark wanted to jump into Baylor Hill. Do you want to put that topic first, Vince?
Sure.
Yeah,
Seems-
I got 10 minutes before
Yeah.
I jump out for a few.
No problem.
Let's see here. I also added, why don't we put up that executive session materials?
Wait a second. Let's make sure we get everybody back first. We need to adjourn and stop recording.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't know. Good, thanks. Okay, so we've had a discussion in executive session concerning a proposed land transfer between Opelco and Rock Island. So I'm looking for a motion from to approve based upon our discussions.
So move.
Jerry, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, so we've got that in, just to clarify on that again, is to authorize the general manager to continue pursuing the transfer of the land as designated in the discussion above from Opelco to Rock Island. All in favor?
Mike,
Aye.
And is there any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you for that, Foster.
Okay, thank you for that as well. Other things on the agenda that I think you guys are up to speed on. I don't think we need to go through the third quarter financial. That was part of the fundamental of the budget. So I think we got that satisfied.
Agreed.
The tariffs, we've had some good discussion about some of the tariff alternatives that we're going to bring back in December.
Correct.
So we got the first read squared away. And then the board has had the copy of the standard November monthly board report materials that are in the materials, and probably don't need to go through those in any detail.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unless anybody has any question in particular about any of that material. Well, then I propose that we finish up this session and begin with Rock Island.
Perfect. All right, let me reach out to our group.
Yep, pull them forth.
Why don't we
So we'll close out of this one, Vince.
Yeah,
This
yes, correct.
ends the regular meeting.
We're done with that.
Okay, and I don't know if